Oh, hi.
Hi, my name is Mina, and on this channel, I talk about fashion, food, no, that's not right, fashion, media, and culture, but today, I am gonna be talking about food.
Is Ozempic right for me?
I wanted to know if you'd like to go out to dinner with me Saturday.
I'm like super distracted at this moment because I just got my nails done the other day. I had previously gotten my nails done recently, but then I was at this shoot and it was very high production because there was a manicurist on set. I have never been to a shoot with a manicurist on set. And they wanted a different look for my nails, so they gave me these talons. I don't think there were any photographs that actually showed my hands because they were all portraits. So that was kind of like sad because they look sickening. But the downside is I don't really ever keep my nails this long. Like this is really long for me because I grew up playing piano and you just like can't play piano with long nails. But I can't do anything. I feel like I'm Edward Scissorhands right now. Okay, so yeah, today I'm talking about food, but I will be talking also about like wellness and fashion and beauty because it's all connected. I don't know, I was like inspired to do this because I don't know if I'm just at the age where food becomes more topical because I perpetually feel like my body can't bounce back from a diet of instant ramen and iced coffee anymore, or if something specifically has shifted in the cultural zeitgeist. But whatever it is, I'm not alone, because apparently Zoomers care a lot about food. Vogue Business reported last year, coming out of the pandemic and into a recession, food has remained a status symbol for some price-sensitive Gen Zs, much like a luxury item or piece of music merch, experts agree. Out of 166 16 to 24-year-old teen Vogue, Glamour, and Allure readers in the US, more than half have bought what they consider to be luxury food or drink in the last year. Probably no other luxury food business has gotten as much hype online as Erewhon, an expensive supermarket chain in LA. Last year, The Cut published a viral piece on Zoomers reportedly working 2 jobs to afford daily Erewhon, spending upwards of $200 a week. I think the rise in luxury food purchases is in part the lipstick effect at work. The lipstick effect is this economic phenomenon where people stop spending money on big ticket items like a fancy car or luxury vacation and instead treat themselves to small things that make them feel good, like lipstick, hence the name. It's this idea that basically no matter what the economic circumstances are, people still want to engage in some kind of frivolous consumption to make them feel better.
There's so many beautiful things out there to buy. How can you possibly resist them?
So today I want to talk about food trends, the Gen Z and millennial focus on wellness and organics, the luxury coding of food itself, and the rise of the chefluencer. Today's video is sponsored by Audible, the world's leader in audio entertainment, audiobooks, podcasts, and Audible originals. If you haven't listened to a thriller before, I highly recommend doing it. It's so much fun. If you want to join me, I'm currently listening to The House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. It's like about this weird family who lives in this like creepy boarded up house and their world gets rocked when a neighbor moves in. And if creepy houses isn't your jam, I won't be offended. Audible offers all the latest and greatest titles that the thriller genre has to offer. New members can try it free and get full access to a growing selection of audiobooks, Audible originals, and podcasts. You can download included titles all you want. Visit audible.com/Gramelita for a free trial of Audible. In her 2016 book, Feast for the Eyes, The Story of Food and Photography, Susan Bright wrote, "Ultimately, food is not only about literal taste, but also about taste with a capital T, both the lifestyles we aspire to and the building blocks of culture itself."
People's idea of luxury right now isn't even luxury. It's somebody being able to go to the grocery store and get a full cart and call it a grocery haul.
Even though it feels dystopian to say that food is a luxury, this has always been the case. The rich have always had a different diet from the middle class and the poor. For example, the food served at Louis XIV's banquets in the 17th century were more lavish than any of the food eaten in the rest of France. His chefs would request exotic foods from other countries or ingredients that were rare and expensive. Louis XIV's stomach was allegedly 3 times the size of an average adult. And even the manner of eating was vastly different. One practice that was formalized during his reign, but was actually popular during the Middle Ages, so he didn't invent this. It's the service à la française, which is a system by which the dishes for each course are laid out all on the table all at once, emphasizing the aesthetic importance of presenting the food and making sure that the dishes all like go together aesthetically. Louis' banquets also featured musicians and dancers for additional entertainment, and there was this idea that each banquet had to outdo the last. Louis put a high value on aesthetics during his reign. His court invested heavily in France's arts, fashion, and cuisine, and the impact can be felt still today with the way that people romanticize France. According to fashion historian Valerie Steele, the theater of power was very important. Louis XIV wanted to make sure that his appearance and the appearance of his courtiers were in accordance with his idea of being a modern, powerful, civilized monarch. No longer just a warrior king from the Middle Ages, but a real kind of sun king with all the kinds of mythological connotations. Yeah, if you didn't know, Louis XIV was also called the Sun King. The last French queen, Marie Antoinette, continues to carry the legacy of French aristocracy, and I'd argue is actually more linked with extravagance than Louis XIV, at least in like popular culture. The most famous pop culture example is, of course, Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette, which features the iconic I Want Candy sequence that takes absolutely no prisoners in showing the level of excess afforded to her in real life. As Elizabeth Way writes, fashion and food may be the most potent symbols of aristocratic extravagance, and these ideas persist in contemporary culture.
Let them eat cake.
For Moschino's Fall/Winter 2020 collection, Jeremy Scott dressed his models in garments that looked like cakes and pastries. The collection intended to draw attention to decadence and class inequality. References to Marie Antoinette were used to really drive home the theme. According to the runway show notes, the confectionery cocktail dresses stand as a sly comment on the denseness of certain people in power. Even though you could say that critiquing class by producing a luxury collection is having your cake and eating it too, no pun intended, Scott has said about it, "All I can do is offer respite. Even if you continue to fight, you need that moment of joy. We all need something uplifting. My role on this earth has only ever been to spread joy and bring happiness." It seems like today, to the mainstream at least, daily healthy groceries is probably considered more luxurious than like elaborate buttery one-off meals a la dining at a French restaurant. Though I think just because of how dominant the French are in high culture, French food will probably always be considered luxurious on some level, so I'm like not worried about them. Given the shift towards healthy eating, I thought I'd give a brief overview about why healthy food costs so much. There's actually so much more than what I'm going to say, so I highly suggest reading Food Power by Bryan McDonald if you want to learn more about our food system. I relied on it very heavily for all my discoveries. But I'm going to start in the 1950s. The 1950s is stereotyped as being like the casserole era, and also the era of those really weird, gross-looking savory gelatin dishes. I love being Asian. The 50s was also known for bringing convenient foods into the American diet, such as frozen orange juice concentrate and canned chicken breast, which I don't even know if they still sell because I don't think I've ever seen that on the shelves. Packaged cake mixes were first introduced in 1947 and by 1957 accounted for more than half of the homemade cakes in America. People liked these pre-made or easy to prep food options because it gave them more flexibility to manage their schedules. As Fortune described the trend in 1953, with babies to take care of, jobs to hold down, and maids scarce, housewives looked to the food processors to perform many of the services formerly carried on in the family kitchen. Changing food preferences helped grow the food market to a $60 billion industry in 1953, $10 billion more than industry specialists had predicted. And on the flip side, home production of foods, aka foods grown in home gardens, continued to decline from at least 1/3 of America's food production before World War I to 18% in 1942 to just 8% in 1955. There were also all these technological breakthroughs that made food production faster, created more secure packaging, and better preserved food texture and flavor. What this also meant, though, was that many produced products were roughly the same. As a result, companies spent more on advertising and promotional efforts to make their products more appealing than competitors, with the hopes of building brand loyalty.
Soup and sandwich, soup and sandwich. Have your favorite Campbell soup and sandwich.
For example, one grocery store advertisement from 1955 urged shoppers to stockpile only quality IGA brand foods to prepare for a nuclear attack. By 1954, the USDA reported that the value added by manufacturing and food processing had risen considerably, and Americans were paying $4 billion a year more, adjusted for price changes, than they did in 1939 for the convenience of products that transferred some of the work of food preparation from the home to the factory. But then in the 1960s, an organic movement grew traction with principles focused on offering a sustainable, healthy, fair, and safe alternative to the corporate monster that industrialized agriculture had become. Organic agriculture sought to bring food production systems back to the land and operate within the limits of nature. Nowadays, the term organic is arguably greenwashing. I'd recommend reading Michael Pollan's The Omnivore's Dilemma to get a better understanding of the industry. But in short, the USDA implemented a very watery set of standards for what's considered organic. Pollan calls the large companies that produce organic food using industrial methods as big organic, and although they grow products without synthetic pesticides and fertilizers as required by the USDA, they often engage in long-distance transportation, energy-intensive production, unethical migrant labor, and animal cruelty. As an example, in his book, Pollan talks about a company called Petaluma Poultry. He picked up a chicken from this company from the supermarket that claimed to be sustainably farmed, free range, and even the company gave this chicken a name, Rosie. He ended up visiting the farm and found it to be more of an animal factory. Rosie lived in a shed with 20,000 other Rosies who lived very similar lives to any other industrial chicken, other than the fact that their feed is certified organic. The free range label was allowed because there was a little door in the shed that led to a narrow grassy yard, but the door remained shut until the birds were at least 5 or 6 weeks old to prevent them from potentially catching any diseases. And then the chickens were slaughtered only 2 weeks later. So for most of their life, they spend it not seeing any sunlight or grass. Well, I can believe that organic feed and fertilizers cost more than synthetic ones, which might justify a higher price for organic goods than non-organic. I also often wonder if organic industrial farms know they can upcharge more because people assume that these farms, these companies are going above and beyond a standard commercial farm when in reality they aren't. I mean, studies show Americans are prepared to pay premium to enhance their well-being. Regardless, the ability for big organic to function means that smaller, more ethical farms are squashed out. Something else I learned in the book is that supermarket chains don't want to work with dozens of different organic farmers. They'd rather work with one company that is big enough to offer a complete line of fruits and vegetables, every SKU in the produce section. Which means not only are small farms having trouble finding buyers, but also that it becomes more difficult for consumers to find and buy quality food. I think the positive thing, though, is that more consumers are starting to recognize the lie of big organic, and this is why the people who have the means are more attracted to farmers markets and grocery stores like erewhon, which is a certified B Corp, a certification meaning that the company is ethical and sustainable. However, I think I should mention that large companies like Nespresso, which I feel like at least have a pretty large carbon footprint from their coffee pods, achieved the certification, which makes me question how rigorous the review process is. But whether or not erewhon is as sustainable as they market themselves to be, I'm still waiting for an erewhon tell-all documentary. People believe it, and they're willing to pay for it. Also, there's been a growing concern over health and wellness in the culture in general. McKinsey's latest Future of Wellness research found that Zoomers and millennials are purchasing more wellness products and services than older generations across the US, China, and the UK, ballooning into an industry valued at $23.5 billion in 2023. In terms of the food side of the health and wellness category, American consumers are buying more superfoods, investing in probiotic foods to improve their gut health, and approximately 28% of Americans are consuming more protein than before. A lot of this interest probably has to do with having more access to information, and then of course social media and the consequent focus on appearance and desire for community. I'm sure a good number of people bought the Hailey Bieber erewhon smoothies for the sole purpose of being able to take part in a trend, me included. I'm not better than anyone else. And my honest review is that the smoothie was too sweet for my taste, but erewhon's non-celebrity affiliated mango smoothie, which I can't remember the name of, I tried that the last time I was in LA and it was quite good. Another reason is potentially COVID-19 and how it made us all consider our health and wellness more seriously. Since the pandemic, I'd say we've seen the rise of a certain type of influencer. the chefluencer, aka an influencer who makes cooking videos for social media and who may or may not be working as an actual chef. I would say that the social media interest in chefs mostly stem from pandemic cooking content in which more people were at home and either wanted to learn to cook to avoid eating out or experimented in the kitchen to pass the time. This meant that there were more people wanting to make cooking content.
Prep with me for my client's 16-person dinner party.
Here's the green onion.
Thyme, garlic, and a little bit of butter to baste the steak.
But also more people wanting to consume said content. But we also have to talk about Jeremy Allen White, whose consistent placement on the White Boy of the Month charts probably helped. White has been in Hollywood for a bit of time now, but his role as sexy chef Carmi in The Bear catapulted him into the spotlight and memeified kitchen lingo like Yes Chef. Riding the hot chef wave last year, The Cut published a piece profiling the rise of thirst trap chefs like Cedric Lorenzen and Anthony Randello, who not only cook topless, but also make explicitly sensual gestures to the food they're handling.
How many people were scared? Me too. I was really, really scared.
I'm not sure if these guys are killing two birds with one stone by using TikTok as both their job and a dating app, or if they've just realized that to go viral, you have to be a bit more creative and theatrical. Whatever the reason, I think part of why they've become so successful doing this is because of how cooking has been traditionally delegated as a woman's chore. And so there is something pleasing or cringeworthy, or at least interesting, about seeing a man embracing that role and putting an aggressively masculine spin on it. To clarify, this kind of cooking content does not work on me. I'm not like you bitches. Just kidding. But I see why it's appealing for some women. Danny Mayer wrote for Esquire about these TikTok creators and notes that for men, the kitchen is a playground. She quotes academic Irina Mihalaki, who wrote, "The process of making cooking safe for men included the emphasis on play and experimentation as the main difference between masculine cooking and domestic suburban cooking. While women cooked out of necessity, the new man of the 1960s cooked out of pleasure." Mayer notes, "Perhaps it is this blend of pleasure and play with the expertise these hot chefs exemplify that is key. Those are some of the traits we associate with people who cook us luscious meals, and we can't help but imagine how such traits might extend into, say, their approach to romance." I would say that the traits associated with a guy who cooks for fun include creativity, passion, discipline, and knowledge of how to use his hands. And imagining someone who loves to cook for you every meal, a task that many of us don't enjoy doing, or at least I don't enjoy doing, is also appealing. Women chefs have benefited too, though. Gabriette, who had a bit of a following from being in the band Nasty Cherry, exploded in popularity when she started producing cooking videos. While her food looks good, I think the whole package of being a pretty girl with a strong aesthetic who has a hobby is what makes her successful. Victoria Vasileva writes in her Substack, "It's cool to be hot, but in today's oversaturated influencer economy, it's even cooler if you are hot and have a hobby. It's also refreshing to see content creators care about something more than the likes and comments that they get." Fashion model food content is nothing new, okay? There's a bunch of videos on YouTube of Victoria's Secret models vlogging about what they eat in a day. Usually it's less well received than non-model food influencer content, I find, which I'll talk about later. But what makes Gabriette interesting is that she breaks away from the mold of like acai bowls and superfood powders to like actual foods that could be appealing to non-models, such as empanadas and scallop crudo. She still does have a mostly health-conscious way of eating. She often makes recipes that are grain-free with vegan ingredients, but it seems like she's actually interested in making food that she wants to eat and not just making food that she's like supposed to eat. This is all on top of having actual culinary skills, which cannot be said for some models. I think what works for Gabriette is that she doesn't try to be relatable. I think especially in the realm of food, a lot of people have difficulty seeing models as relatable. Being able to cook good food and recreate recipes of existing supermarket products is incredibly impressive, and it's a very niche skill. And something that I think people would watch even if like the person making this content wasn't conventionally attractive. But obviously it still helps if you are. That's not to say that every model with cooking skills is getting positive attention though. Nara Smith, a model and home cook, became notorious on TikTok for her slow cooking videos, and I really mean slow cooking.
Toddlers requested some yogurt this morning and we were running low, so I just decided to make it myself.
Nara is a stay-at-home mom. She has 2 young kids, is pregnant, and spends most of her day cooking for her family while wearing beautiful outfits. Her husband is also a model and a Mormon, which has caused many people to believe that they are pushing Mormon propaganda. I want to add, though, that Nara has recently said she's not a practicing Mormon, and the two were not married in a temple.
I don't wear garments. I didn't get married in the temple. Both me and my husband are on our own journeys and figuring out how we want to raise our kids.
I personally have no issue with Nara. And what I find really weird about all of this is that she's sort of become the poster child for the whole trad wife movement when, to my knowledge, she has never said her lifestyle is better than other people's, and she's never said that women shouldn't be working. She hasn't said anything crazy. And she's also not even fully a stay-at-home mom, in my opinion, because in my opinion, anyone who's monetizing content on TikTok is not a stay-at-home mom. They are a work-from-home mom. She's a content creator. And also, while I think that she probably loves cooking, genuinely, I highly doubt that she spends this much time cooking every single thing that her kids eat. But also, if she had the time and she loves to do it, then who cares? I think the root cause of people's fury towards Nara Smith is because they feel that she's encapsulating the perfect ideal of motherhood that's been spoon-fed to all of us by Western society. She's a rich, young mom who spends a lot of time nurturing her family. She loves doing it, and she is beautiful and never seems stressed and never complains online. And it's also not lost on me that she's Black, and Black women are held to remarkably unfair standards, especially when it comes to motherhood. The writer of the Substack Cartoons Hate Her wrote a really great essay on the feeling of guilt a lot of mothers have that I think is relevant and also really nice because she writes as a mother herself. She writes, "This is one reason that mom discourse is so toxic. When you say that you've made a certain decision, for example, working versus staying home, or using screens versus not using screens, you are implying that the other choice is harmful to children, or at least not beneficial. You can say, this is just me, I don't judge anyone who does things differently, as I often do, but the implication is there. You made the choice for a reason. Yes, every kid is different, but on some level, you think you chose the better thing. Otherwise, why would you have chosen it? It can be difficult to reach across the aisle sometimes and talk with women who have made all the opposite decisions we have, feeling neither judgmental of them or judged by them." Regardless of how we feel towards certain food influencers, the one thing that's true is that food is in. And brands who are always quick to cash in on a mainstream interest are pivoting towards food as well. Technically, this isn't a super new idea. Giorgio Armani made history in 1998 when he opened the first luxury branded restaurant, the Emporio Armani Cafe in Paris. At the time, Armani told Forbes that he wanted a new concept to give customers a break from shopping, a place to have lunch or a drink after work. But the difference is, in those days, branded restaurants were developed to keep customers in the store longer, with the hope that they would spend more. It was a sort of bonus thing for existing clients. But now there are restaurants designed as marketing attractions with the goal of acquiring new customers. Zoe Hoffman writes for NSS magazine, "Not only does it increase revenue, but it also solidifies brands as more than just places to buy clothes. They become cultural elements of society, recognized for more than their collections. And of course, working with Michelin-starred chefs means the food is delicious, which is always a positive point." These restaurants allow luxury brands to fold in more people into their brand community without having to compromise their clothing prices. A Geczy Asteria burger at their Beverly Hills location will cost you about $48 before tax and tip, which is still considered quite a lot for a burger, but is much more affordable compared to anything they sell at their boutiques. Ralph Lauren actually offers 2 tiers of food pricing, a model that mimics how the brand offers both expensive and cheaper clothing lines. Their Polo Bar in Manhattan qualifies for a $3 sign rating, I think. But for anyone who doesn't want to pay $45 for a Branzino, but who still wants to be folded into the Ralph Lauren brand, well, lucky for them, they can purchase a latte from the brand's coffee stand, Ralph's Coffee, for under $10. Having drank a luxury branded coffee from a redacted brand, because, I'm not trying to start any drama, I can say there's nothing really special about branded coffee, at least the one I had. The only thing that's special is the logoed coffee cup, which you can post on social media for extra clout. And speaking of being in the age of social media advertising, fashion brands are pressured to go viral, which means they want to create spectacles worthy of sharing online. I talked about how runway shows have become more interactive in a previous video, but similarly, fashion branded food installations and dinners have also sprung up to compel invited influencers and fashion writers to make content. For example, the jewelry brand Mejuri hosted a gelato pop-up and Chin Chin in London Soho, where guests could browse the latest collection while eating gelato. This was after running an ad campaign that showed pictures of hands holding food, by the way. Also, being able to cross over into multiple industries allows brands to outreach influencers from different categories. For example, a clothing brand launching a homeware line can now gift branded, candles to an interior decorator influencer. And, in a similar vein, more films and TV shows these days are also crossing genres so that they can be listed under multiple different streaming lists. Like, they can be listed under top comedies of the month and top romances of the month. It's rare now for a movie to just be a straight comedy because it's not as marketable. I also feel like it might be a loophole for awards season, which is why a bunch of my friends and I were confused that The Bear was nominated for, Best Comedy in the TV category. Sure, there are funny moments, but I wouldn't really consider it a comedy. It's kind of dark. It just sounded like to me that they didn't want to compete in the same category as Succession, which is a show that I actually think is funnier than The Bear, but was considered a drama during award season. But honestly, food is the universal language, and you don't have to be a food influencer to post food on your account. A lot of influencers, regardless of their niche, will post about their meals. Monica Titten explains, food is often used instrumentally by a fashion influencer as an index of their persona's authenticity. Nothing signals real-life credibility like the very human and universal need to eat. And on social media, nothing engages followers like an enticing photograph of a meal. It's interesting, though, that we're seeing the rise of food posting and food events in the fashion scene, given the fashion industry's history of encouraging starvation to get a thin body ideal. I think this is why when a model, or in particular a thin influencer, when they post a lot about food online, it's not always as well received. For instance, back in February 2023, Bella Hadid said in an interview that her favorite snack was pizza.
Probably eat pizza at least once a day. It's always a go-to because it always, it tastes good every time.
The interview segment was posted onto TikTok where everyone had a field day, with many people proclaiming that pizza was not actually Bella's favorite food. I actually do think Bella Hadid loves pizza. A hot take, maybe. And at the risk of sounding like a stalker, but I swear I just did a quick Google search yesterday. In 2015, she name dropped her favorite New York pizza places in a fashionista interview. They include, if you're interested, Gemma's, Bar Pitti, and The Bowery. She's also talked about pizza in a number of other interviews over the years and has been photographed plenty of times with pizza in hand. I think what this annoyance actually stems from, and Bella was just a scapegoat for this, but it really comes down to the overall distrust people have towards thin people eating junk food, combined with the annoyance towards celebrities pretending to be more relatable than they are. To the first point, pizza seems to be the number one choice when it comes down to thin girls posing with food, and therefore is the food that most people eye with suspicion. For example, apparently an annual tradition following the Victoria's Secret fashion show, when those were still a thing, was a giant pizza party among all the models. There's nothing unique about a celebratory pizza party, but we should consider the context. For years, fashion magazines glorified these Victoria's Secret models and spread unhealthy dieting tips to bully the rest of us into trying to look like them. And rather than blaming the industry for pushing this propaganda, a lot of people instead blamed the models. So a pizza party splurge, whether or not it actually happened, sounded unrealistic to many people, read as a subtle flex that these models could just eat badly and still look the way that they do, or it sounded like these models were trying to absolve themselves from perpetuating toxic beauty standards.
Pizza. Pizza.
Pizza.
Lily's having a pizza party after this.
I've talked to a lot of models, and many of them, at least nowadays, are really not judgmental about other people's bodies and are actually very judgmental about their own because they're sort of told during their entire career that their bodies are the only things worthy about them. While I think sometimes models can internalize that and then become responsible for pushing unhealthy dieting advice, like when Kate Moss infamously said, "Nothing tastes as good as skinny feels," a lot of them are just as negatively affected by the industry's ideals as the rest of us. Because let's face it, the fashion industry has always been telling people they need to be thinner and what to eat and what not to eat. A Vogue article that was written in 1913 titled "The Diet's the Thing" had an entire section dedicated to starvation methods in order to lose 5 to 10 pounds each month. And yet, despite these attitudes towards eating, the fashion industry still loves to photograph a skinny model next to bountiful foods, a framing that fashion scholar Jess Berry calls the gluttonous gamine. Berry explains that these images explore women's consumption as metaphorical of sexual appetite, and argues that food is portrayed as either seduction or revulsion. Philosopher Mikhail Bakhtin explored the dichotomy between classical and grotesque bodies that I think we can apply to this. In his definition, the classical body is the body of Greek sculpture and Renaissance paintings, a body that possesses no open orifices. For Bakhtin, the grotesque body, on the other hand, is one that eats, drinks, defecates, copulates, becomes pregnant, etc. It embraces mutable human anatomy. It's like the real life version, and the classical is like the Barbie doll. The fashion industry has historically emphasized the classical body by making their thin models into objects that pose prettily next to food. They're usually not eating the food. That's why the October 2010 Vogue Paris issue, which featured an editorial with plus-size model Crystal Wren, was shocking at the time. The photos were shot by Terry Richardson and mostly consisted of Wren feasting on a massive plate of spaghetti, various meats, seafood, and cheese. Amy Odell reported for The Cut at the time, "The mammoth of an issue is already riding on plenty of hype, and these images have just the kind of shock value that will aid that effort. Look at the plus-size model eating. Ew, yuck, food, blah." Despite the mini explosion of plus-size models in fashion magazines over the past year, fashion still seems to be having a hard time not gawking at them. Not only is Crystal eating, but she's plus size too. And what Odell refers to in her report is that these pictures offer a new kind of fetish to appear, the one that can only see fat bodies as an archetype of a voluptuous Venus. And they're not really a step forward towards breaking the barrier between fashion and food. I do feel like the increased interest in food is less about food itself, ironically, and more about aligning with the status markers of rich celebrities, as well as conveying a thin body type, which is why it's mostly healthy food that's being talked about. And this is made clear to me about the rise in drugs like Ozempic happening at the same time. Ozempic is a semaglutide drug that famously has appetite reduction side effects and is being increasingly misused as a weight loss method rather than to help regulate diabetes, which is what it was originally designed for. CNN reported in October last year, with 1.7% of America's population prescribed a semaglutide drug in 2023, up 40-fold in the past years. That could spell serious trouble for the food industry. I also feel like that percentage is quite low because I'm sure there are a bunch of people who are not actually prescribed Ozempic and are kind of doing it under the table. Even though Ozempic is still a new trend though, there are some rising concerns among industry people that consumers will buy less food because they won't be as hungry. However, because of how expensive Ozempic is, without insurance, it's around $1,000 for a monthly supply, and you have to keep taking it or your appetite comes back. I think a lot of people don't realize that. You basically have to take it forever. So the price for one, and then the fact that it's only available as an injection, which could scare some needle-phobic people, these things can prevent a majority of people from taking it. Conagra CEO Sean Connolly said that any significant drop in calorie consumption due to the drugs is a long way off. But if the meds do gain traction, he said the company would respond with new products. Let's say they go to smaller portions, then we evolve the innovations and we design smaller portions. And if they switch to different types of nutrients, we switch to different types of nutrients. If they change the kind of pack sizes they snack on, we'll change that. Food trends shift every so often, like any other consumer good. So big companies have had some practice in introducing or discontinuing products to match people's evolving tastes. For example, Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola have already started offering their products in smaller sizes for customers who want help with portion control or who want to spend less because I think they cost less, or they should cost less. However, Bernstein analyst Alexia Howard cautions that drugs like Ozempic have the potential to have a bigger impact on food consumption than arguably anything that we've seen before. That's daunting. Changes won't happen overnight, she notes, but it could be long-lasting. I'm personally hoping that Ozempic, Wegovy, similar drugs, that they'll never become so impactful that they'll actually change the entire food industry. Though I also think that reading the responses Big Snack has made is kind of worrisome and gross. The concerns are never about public health and safety and only about how to sell more snacks, which is fabulous. I love corporate responsibility. What I do hope to happen is just snacks being healthier. we do have a problem in America with how unhealthy a lot of these products that are getting pushed onto the American public are. So I'm for like healthier snacks, but I hope it's not because they feel like everyone's taking dieting drugs. Okay, anyway, this is the end of the video. Thank you so much for sticking around. As always, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Would love to know what your thoughts are on the trendification of food, and I'll see you next time. Bye.